Number one, they are selfish in the bedroom, which doesn't mean that it's all about giving to them. It can also mean that they are fixated or obsessed on pushing your buttons in a certain way to give you that ego gratification of being the kind of man or woman who can get you off and be a good lover. If there's no conversation about how the two of you want to explore together, and there's no real, genuine possibility of going beyond their fixed preferences, the selfishness is a really big red flag that there's probably some deeper traumatic undercurrents around control or otherwise not being flexible enough to actually make a relationship work. Number two red flag when it comes to trauma bonds and toxic relationships, this is the entire spectrum of victim complex and savior complex, which if you look at shadow psychology is this underlying dynamic where by default, the general stereotype will be one person goes in the victimization mode of please fix me, please rescue me, I am a poor, fragile, broken thing, and I need someone who's as big and strong and compassionate as you to come and sweep me off my feet and put me back together. And on the other side of the spectrum, we have the savior complex, which is the white knight riding on his or her white horse and coming in at the fateful moment to sweep you off your feet and take you to happily ever after. Both sides of the spectrum are ultimately the same dysfunctional, trauma-based survival strategy. And if you're noticing that you're either caught in victimization or in the rescue fantasy, you're either fixing or wanting to be fixed, this is an unfortunate situation which many of us, if we're being honest, will have some degree of connection to. Usually within a relationship, there's some degree of unconscious fixing or saving. It's not all bad, but if it's completely overblown, you really need to watch out for this one. I'm warning you in advance, it will be the death of a relationship if you go too far into the extremes, because the extremes are bound to collapse or swing back violently given enough time. Number three, looking over at my list here of 22 toxic red flags, mood swings and emotional volatility. This one is hopefully obvious, but it isn't just anger issues or blowing up in your face over the smallest things. It's actually their own nervous system which you need to be concerned with. If they don't have the ability to self-regulate and calm themselves down because they broke a glass or someone said a slightly mean thing at work and it gets really, really intense inside of them, you are also going to be experiencing all of that emotional volatility, and you're going to spend countless hours trying to put out the fires of their own trauma-based instabilities. And if you've ever been in a relationship like this, where it always seems like things are getting very edgy, you always have this kind of background worry that if you have to mention anything that's even slightly negative, they're going to blow up or they're going to go off and run away for a few days. Like even really small things, small bits of constructive feedback, not even the big things in life. If they're emotionally volatile, if they're prone to mood swings, this is a really strong sign that they've got unresolved trauma, or at the very least their nervous system is unfortunately in a state of disrepair, which isn't their fault. Usually it's a family origin kind of situation. I'm not trying to shame or blame the toxic partner throughout any of this video. But you do need to be aware that if you're going to be involved with this kind of person and you're noticing the incredibly unpredictable swinging from high to low and everywhere in between, it will start to affect your mental health. And this takes us on to the fourth red flag to look out for, which is gaslighting and manipulation. This is when it gets even more extreme, and it's actually the topic which inspired today's Inner Work Library question series. Gaslighting is when they're trying to get you to see reality the way that they want you to see it rather than how it actually is. These are small things like, oh no, you're imagining things, I didn't do that, why are you always making it such a big deal? And manipulation, of course, has many different aspects. There are countless videos on the internet talking about emotional narcissistic manipulation, but if we make the connection back to the previous red flag, the emotional instability, and we start to draw out their interior world and imagine it in a relationship dynamic, no wonder, no question, no doubt about it, they are going to bring you into a world of distortion and a world of high highs and low lows, because if you want to understand gaslighting, you want to understand the kind of motivation sociopathically or psychopathically towards lying and manipulating, that's great. If you want to take a different perspective and look at the trauma-informed nervous system dysregulation kind of approach, It's understanding that their internal world is all they can actually see. So if they're stuck in a manipulation pattern, it's because they're trying to, in a very distorted way, they're trying to control their own emotions and make themselves feel okay at an ego level by controlling your emotions and doing it in a very shady way, which I don't support, but there is a deeper undercurrent which isn't just about narcissism and psychopathy. There's a nervous system element which is often missed. There's many different approaches to this topic. I'm not going to linger on this red flag for too long, but gaslighting and emotional manipulation do have very particular roots in unresolved trauma, and they're worth considering. Let's move on to the fifth red flag, which is stonewalling or giving the cold shoulder. This is the kind of man or woman who is not present for any kind of communication that's even slightly confrontational, and oftentimes they're not even around for joyous communication. They're just kind of emotionally dead. They're cold, they're slow, they're unengaged, they just don't seem like they're enjoying life very much, and they definitely don't seem like they actually care about you. If you start to notice these patterns, not just in a week, everyone has a bad day, everyone goes through a moment where they don't want to be in conversation or be around their partner, I get it. But if it's a consistent pattern, if you notice they always seem to drop their energy around you, maybe they had a wonderful day at work and they come back in a good mood and within 10 minutes they're suddenly slumped and it seems like you've been completely ignored yet again for the fifth time in a row, in one single week, it's likely that they've got some kind of emotional dysregulation again of either being hyper-avoidant or otherwise having some kind of shutdown response around you, some kind of conversation or variety of conversations that need to happen, which they probably don't feel confident enough to bring forwards. You're seeing that throughout this entire video, I'm not trying to, again, shame or blame the toxic partner and set up this adversarial hate bond where you're punching against them and you're the one who's right and they're the one who's wrong. We all have moments like this. Many of the red flags on this list that we're going to go through in this video, you will also have to some degree. I have times where I'm emotionally cold, but it's not my default character tendency. It's seeing ourselves along the entire spectrum and knowing that we can compassionately work through certain issues and certain trauma-based problems in a relationship if the other person's willing to work through it. So yes, basic principle, red flags usually show up immediately, and you probably shouldn't get engaged or get involved with anyone who is too many of these red flags at once. But if they have a few of them and they're willing to work through them and you can mirror back to each other in a conscious relationship, you can get through it. But let's move on to another red flag. Number 6 red flag, spiritual obsession or spiritual aversion. If they are either entirely dogmatic towards their chosen religion or even dogmatic towards their atheism, they either love God or they hate God, and it's all they seem to talk about, just be wary that there's only so long that you can be in a level-headed conversation with them before they either bring out some kind of fire and brimstone, God-based perspective, some kind of distorted teaching from maybe an Abrahamic religion, or maybe alternatively they go towards the non-traditional route and they get out the natal chart and the tarot cards and they see what's happening in the planets and they start to do a more new age religious idea of, oh, it's okay, it's just because it's the full moon and this planet's in retrograde, and the reason I'm being such a bitch today is because of what's happening in my north node, and just avoiding that personal responsibility. The key element here is that it's a spiritual bypassing. No matter the religion, no matter what's going on, no matter the thinking, the spiritual belief system, if someone's avoiding responsibility for the real things that are going on in a relationship because of what God does or does not want, or what the cards may or may not say, this will be a very difficult person to actually fall in love with, stay in love with, and build a life with. Number 7 red flag, they are needy and codependent. This one is pretty self-explanatory. If they're always demanding your time, they don't seem to have an ability to be on their own, and they're just codependently enmeshed at quite an obvious and repeated level, this is going to be a massive issue, and it ties in to the exact opposite side of this issue, which is number 8. They're avoidant and dysfunctionally independent. Number 7, they always need you. Number 8, they never need you. Two sides of the same spectrum. We all have a default leaning. For example, in myself, I tend to be more towards the independent side, but dysfunctional hyper-independence would be never asking for help. Even if I had something really, really troublesome, if I were to never ask you for help, that would be dysfunctional independence. If I were to emotionally work through something myself and then come to you and say, hey, I worked through this thing and I could do with maybe just some witnessing. I don't need help, but, I'm making contact. You don't need to be sharing everything. And then the other side, the codependent enmeshment side, is everything. It almost goes back into the victim complex kind of issue, right? Two sides of the same spectrum. I'm sure you're familiar with them. We'll move on to an interesting red flag, which is number 9. And this one is something that I really want you to watch out for, because it's something that I didn't realize early on. And now that I do notice this, even within friendships or within potential client relationships, if I notice this red flag, I really do consider it quite seriously. Number 9, they enjoy gossip. They like talking badly about other people. It seems that there's always this conversational theme of what so-and-so did and how could they do that and what do you think about this, and various punishing, judgmental remarks. If they enjoy gossip, it doesn't matter what they're gossiping about, you can almost guarantee that they're going to gossip about you, and you can almost guarantee that even if they're not, they're zipping their mouth, they're not saying it externally, on the inside, that judgmentalism is going to be there. And usually this will either be judgmentalism towards you, and it's going to be quite a critical, prickly person, or unfortunately it will turn self-destructive and they'll have kind of a shameful, self-hating narrative, because outwards criticism tends to come back and become inwards criticism. If someone is really critical towards people around them, you can almost guarantee that they have a private narrative inside of them where they're also quite critical to their various parts and subpersonalities and shadow behaviors that they don't want you to see. Massive red flag, watch out for gossip. But it's not the most important red flag. I truly believe that the number 10 red flag on this list is the biggest red flag that you need to watch out for. If you ever encounter a person like this, go the opposite direction. Don't even text them back. Just cut all contact. Number 10, they don't read books. It's a bit of a joke. But if they don't read books, and I love books, if they're not interested in learning, if they're not interested in going further and actually exploring with their mind, and they don't have that natural drive to be more conscious and more aware, and you're probably someone who likewise wants to be more conscious and more aware, it might not be the biggest red flag. But for me personally, if I have a friend or even, again, a potential client, let alone a romantic partner, and they haven't read a book in the last year, it's a pretty strong red flag that they're not intellectually adventurous. And that makes it quite difficult at a value level, because your way of living your life is expanding. And if they're not expansive, they're not interested in doing something which takes a bit of effort to maybe develop themselves. It might work for a few years, but eventually if you keep developing and they stay at this point, you're just going to grow away from each other because they're not interested in following you into either new territory or going out into their own territory. And even best yet, imagine like they read their own book, you read your own book, you come back and you talk about the things that you've learned. That's real collaboration, real partnership. It might not be the biggest red flag on the list, but a genuine number 10 red flag. If they don't read books, it could be a sign of some intellectual self-suppression, or at the very least being somewhat of a lazy and disengaged individual. I'll let you decide if it's the worst thing ever. For me, it would be heartbreaking and irreconcilable. Number 11 red flag nonetheless. They are consistently poor in their health choices. This could be obvious in terms of them being clinically obese, which you can see. They're nutritionally deprived and seriously skinny. You can also see that. And you can also notice their food choices. This is something which people don't pay attention to, because it's something that you often don't see until you move in with someone. You might go out to a restaurant and you see, for example, okay, they ordered way too much food or barely any food, or they seem to be eating pretty poorly, but you just don't know until you actually move in with someone how they fuel their body, because someone's eating choices reflect their perceived level of self-worth. If you're dating someone who eats nothing but junk, I can guarantee at an unconscious level, they do not value themselves enough, or unfortunately, they haven't been given the kind of education to value themselves enough to actually invest in higher quality, organic, real food. And this is their problem. It's not your problem until with enough months of living together, they've got all of this junk around. Maybe they've even got things like alcohol around, or they've got a variety of toxic, poisonous, artificial nonsense, you are only going to be able to go so long in that kind of home environment before you also start participating. If they have a really fixed narrative, and this isn't to shame anyone, of course, there's so many issues behind obesity or eating disorders, but if they have these things, just know what you're getting yourself into, because it's going to eventually start withdrawing. It's going to bring you into it. And, it's a really complex issue. I'm not covering it in detail here, but if you notice these things, big red flag. Number 12 ties into this. Addiction issues. Ongoing addiction issues. Drink, drugs, cigarettes, vapes, gambling, phone addiction, going on adult websites. There's so many different addictions that we all have one or two of them, and some of us, probably the majority of people who are watching this video, have suffered with addiction to at least some significant degree at least once in their lives. I know for myself, the reason that I'm going on 5 years sober is that I've needed to clean my consciousness of all of that vice and destructiveness to the best of my ability. I'm not perfect, never going to be perfect, but if you notice that they have a daily drinking habit, or they can't go anywhere without their vape, or they always seem to be glued to their phone, that is going to be a massive obstacle to your intimacy. And if you want to lead the way in actually upgrading your relationship, just make sure that you sort your own internal home out first. If you're going into a relationship with your own issues and your own addiction problems, then don't expect to be dating someone who has all of that completely resolved. You're not going to attract, and this is like a savage, like, I got you, like, here we are. You thought you were looking at the toxic partner. It's actually a shadow work exercise in disguise. You're not going to be able to attract and maintain a sober, conscious, really intentional partner if you're drinking every day, spending 7 hours on your phone, and otherwise wasting time on questionable websites. They're not going to find you attractive. And if you're attracted to that kind of person, just pause to ask yourself, why is that level of consciousness attractive to you? What is it about someone who hurts their body in that way, or otherwise wastes their time, which is somehow, for some reason, attractive to you? You have to look at the shadow magnetisms. Otherwise, you're going to be gaslighting your own self-judgment. That there must be some reason. For most people, usually, if someone's kind of like in that drinking, drugging, more kind of party lifestyle, it gives them permission to be less serious. It gives them the permission to be like, my partner doesn't take life too seriously. I'm not going to take life seriously either. I'll just drink Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. Let's just do it together. It gives you a permission slip to be less. That's usually the main thing, but that's for you to reflect on your own time. Let's move on to number 13, red flag. Over the halfway point at this moment, and I'm rapidly moving through this. Hopefully we're keeping up. Number 13, red flag. They have constant family drama. They are enmeshed in their family story. They're in their 20s, their 30s, or their 40s. Their parents are still treating them like a child. They're still answering the calls from the anxious mom, or maybe the over-controlling father. Every single day, multiple times per week, something's going on in the family. There's drama, there's chaos. Maybe there was abuse in the past, maybe there wasn't. It doesn't necessarily matter for the particularities of just how much time they're over-investing in their family story, even though they're a grown adult and they should have renegotiated from child and parent to adult child of adult parent, and hopefully, renegotiating their communication. It might not seem like a big issue, and I don't want this to be confused with a healthy relationship with our parents where you call your parents once a week and you enjoy going on holidays together. Fantastic. That's wonderfully healthy. I'm not saying you need to cut off all your family, but if they're still caught in very dysfunctional dynamics with their parents and they can't establish the boundary with the mom who's always calling, or the dad who's always demanding something, or just otherwise being inappropriate, it's likely that they're going to continue to have that issue further down the line. If you're considering family or children with this particular man or woman, just know that over-involvement from the grandparents is then going to be quite an issue further down the road. Just watch out for it. You'll be able to see it this week and how they're relating to their family of origin story. It's a big issue. Number 14. This is an interesting one. I'm not sure if I can say the words. I'm going to change the word. It begins with S. Try not to get censored on YouTube. They're either hyper intimate or a-intimate. They're either very into intimacy or not into intimacy at all. I'm avoiding the word that begins with S to try and get this video out to more people. But if they're on either end of the spectrum, where it's all about sensual intimacy, and that seems to be the only way that you bond, or all the way over here, and it's never about flirting or kissing or hugging, they won't even hold your hand, it seems again like they're in that cold shutdown response. Both of these extremes are massive red flags. Doesn't mean that we won't have ventures from either side to another. Maybe during a stressful period of life, one person wants extra intimacy every single day for a few weeks. Another person responds by being a bit withdrawn, and that's their way of self-nourishing, or maybe their self-esteem is low. Don't drop your boyfriend or girlfriend, your husband or your wife, just because they haven't been intimate for a few weeks, or maybe they're being a bit too intimate and you don't want to be doing it that way. There's usually a conversation to be had, but the seasonal is very different from the chronic. Chronic issues around intimacy, making it mean way too much or completely disengaging, really do add up over time. You might be able to get away with it for a few months, but if you've ever been in a situation where you're multiple years of multiple intimate dysfunctions, it just doesn't work. Watch out for it. The bedroom's important. We started with the bedroom, and we're touching on it once again in this red flag. Let's move on to the next cluster of 3 red flags, and this is a really interesting moment in the video because it's about time. Someone's relationship to time. Number 15 red flag of these 3 red flags, they never talk about the past. You don't know much about their history. They don't really want to talk about their family. They won't talk about their previous relationships. They won't talk about what they did at school or maybe their careers. They seem mysterious, but not in a safe way or an interesting way, just in kind of a unnerving way. It's usually a strong sign that either they've gone through some pretty heavy trauma, in which case it's obviously tragic. I'm not trying to shame them for that. But if they have gone through some heavy trauma, or there's unresolved emotional issues around a certain type of relationship or a certain career that went sour, they're going to be holding that in their heart. And all of that festering energy, all of that avoidant energy of not looking back at the things that are hurting them, it's not safely contained in the past. You can't repress your history. It will be inside of you. There's only so long that someone can ignore what's happened before it starts to spill over in their everyday life. And you will be on the unfortunate other end of that. And you just really pay attention to it. There's a difference between being private. Maybe they don't want to talk about every single detail of their previous relationship, but you should be able to have a conversation about how long they were dating, what that was like, some of the things they did together, without this massive charge, or like, why do you always ask about this, or blah, blah, blah. You know, if that comes up, big sign that it's something to focus on. Second of this set of 3, number 16, they never talk about the present. This is moving on. So we've got avoidance of the past, which is usually an indication of trauma, or maybe some kind of shady character behaviors. If they're avoiding the present and they seem checked out from reality, they are caught in escapism. They're emotionally bypassing or dissociating at the very least from what's actually happening this week. This is a kind of man or woman who spends way too much time on the screens, or otherwise just doesn't engage with everyday life. They're not interested in talking about what happened at work. They're not interested in talking about what they were doing that week. They just don't seem to be there. It's almost like they're in waiting mode. They don't exist. They're just drifting through. And if you want to be in a relationship with someone like this, where you're both drifting through together and watching TV or spending too much time on Netflix, I don't recommend it, but if you do want to go down that toxic trauma bonding pathway together, that's your choice. I can imagine you probably don't want that, but if you're starting to notice that your partner or potential romantic interest is really caught in that present moment denial, minimizing kind of the crappiness or their lack of enjoyment of the present moment, it's a big thing to watch out for, because presence is the foundation for conscious relationship. If they're not present with their own life, if they don't enjoy their own life, independent of you, if they don't enjoy their own life, they're probably not going to be an enjoyable person to be around for the life ahead, which takes us into red flag number 17. They never talk about the future, which has 2 different elements to it. Red flag number 17, they never talk about the future. Number 1, either they don't have the ability to plan ahead, which is a real safety issue. Number 2, they're unambitious. And for me, that would be an even bigger issue, because if someone's unambitious, if they don't dream, if they don't hope, if they don't actually want to move towards something, they probably don't have the sufficient life force energy to get anything done that they actually want to get done. They'll dream maybe a little bit. They'll say, oh yeah, maybe I'll do this. But if they don't sit down and make a plan, if they don't put the structure in place, you can't rely on their words. This is why it's such an issue. It doesn't necessarily matter if they're flaky about, I'm going to start painting and they don't paint, or I'm going to play guitar and they don't play guitar. Hobbies don't matter, but your future with them does matter. If they're not interested in talking about where you two might be a year from now, or even where you might be 3 months from now, if they don't want to have conversations about moving locations or career shifts, or maybe even the healing conversations about how could we improve our relationship in the future, massive red flag. This cluster of 3, they're avoiding the past, they're avoiding the present, and they're avoidant of the future. Number 15, 16, and 17, really watch out for these. Let's start finishing on this list with a bit of a light-hearted few coming up, but also they're very significant. Number 18, this is one of those subtle red flags, but you really should watch out for it. They don't like animals, or animals don't like them. And this is different from someone saying, oh yeah, I'm not really a cat person, or I don't really like dogs. If they really don't like pets, or they're actively critical towards, I don't know, that we're walking past a dog on the street and they go, ugh, anything like that, that's a really big sign that they're missing out on something which is about connect. It's just, you've heard these stories, right? You've heard these stories even on the other end of this, where the woman's going out on a date and she has a dog that she's left in the apartment for a few hours. They come back in and the dog goes wild at the man. And then later on, it turns out that he was a escaped felon and he had really bad energy. That's the stereotypical kind of fantasy of the dog picks up on the bad vibes, but there's something true about it. And it works both ways. If a man or a woman doesn't enjoy the idea of petting a cute creature, and we're like, oh, a cat would be nice and a dog would be nice, or even going to the farm and picking up a baby goat. Who doesn't love a baby goat? If they can't imagine enjoying that and they actively resent that, that connects to children further in the future. It's not a foolproof strategy. There are maybe a small number of people who just don't like pets and dogs, but if they can't appreciate cuteness and playful energy, especially kittens and puppies and baby goats, or maybe a really cute donkey at the farm, if they can't appreciate it, they're probably not going to be a good parent for those early years with a child, where you, that love, that desire, that, they're so cute, I just, that glues parents to their children in the best sense possible. Just watch out for it. Another one which may seem maybe not too serious, but it's definitely a red flag you should watch out for. Number 20, they are clumsy or accident prone. You might not think this is an issue. Maybe, okay, they hurt themselves a little bit. They keep cutting their fingers when they're cooking some food, or maybe they hurt themselves at the gym quite often. Not necessarily an issue. But as the intensity amps up, they start having a car accident seemingly every few months, or maybe they keep breaking bones, or they destroy things by accident. They just keep breaking things. Usually, at a deeper psychological level, this relates to either one of two things. There's an undercurrent of unexpressed anger, which means that they are overly charged, so they don't have the ability to control their movements. They'll be like hitting glasses over, and they've got so much energy inside that they can't do a subtle gesture. They just do this because they're overcharged. Or, unfortunately, at a deeper level, it can be a self-destructive, self-harming energy which is coming out in daily action. Someone who doesn't think very highly of themselves and doesn't love themselves will not value themselves enough to just be careful with themselves. They'll be a little bit too, I don't care what happens to me, it just doesn't matter. And they might not do it consciously, but unconsciously, all of these small accidents and the frequency of accidents and the clumsiness overall is something to pay attention to. It's not that they're a dreadful person. It's not that you should drop someone because they, break a few too many plates, or maybe they stumble over or trip over things. But it's definitely not a safe or attractive trait for someone to be clumsy. You want them to be, at the very least, in control of their body and embodied in a way which feels safe. Important point, often overlooked. Final 2 red flags for the video now coming up, and the last one is my favorite if you stuck around all the way to the end. 21. Intentions versus outcomes. This is a bit more of a high-level red flag. I've saved 2 high-level ones for the end. Intentions versus outcomes is the kind of red flag that comes up at about the middling point of consciousness in a relationship. You've got some conscious communication, you can work through conflicts, they're not blowing up on you, they're not being hyper avoidant. You can sit down and have an adult conversation about what is and isn't working, and you can come to a resolution where you say, for example, what should we do to make this real and really make this work for the next months ahead? And you say, oh, thank you for asking. I'd like it if we did this, this, and this. And they say, okay, this, and this, am I understanding correctly? And you both say yes, and you agree to it. And then 1 week, 2 weeks, 4 weeks go by, and it hasn't happened. None of those three things happened, and you keep noticing this pattern. It seems like there's a genuine intention, because there is. I'd imagine there is, unless they're playing some kind of manipulative game. Let's ignore that for now. There's a genuine intention to make the positive change, but it doesn't happen. That's such a hard thing to spot, because this kind of person may not even realize they're doing it, and it might also not be something which is too much of a relationship issue in terms of them trying to be actively malicious or actively destructive. They just might be quite unorganized or not be able to follow through on their word. And for me, if I'm with someone, even just a friend, and they can't follow through on their word, and I notice that pattern, my respect and my trust in them gradually declines. It's a slow burner. It takes months to notice this, but if you've already started to notice the gap between what they say they're going to do and what actually is done is quite a large gap, look out for it. And also, of course, Shadow Psychology 101, pay attention to the areas where you're also doing that. If you're saying things, oh yeah, I'm going to do this, I'm going to show up and we'll do date night every week, and I'm going to make the special meal, and I'm going to give them at least one massage once a month as an intimate kind of bonding experience, and you're not doing the things, that's where you can own your fair share of healthy, conscious relationships. Let's wrap this video up on one of the biggest patterns overall, number 22, saving it for last. Grandiose romantic projection and over-the-top language or completely overblown romantic ideas. If you've ever dated someone who calls you the love of their life within the first week, or maybe even in a more subtle sense, they just don't seem to see any possible flaw in your character. They're saying that they unconditionally love you, you are an angel on earth, and they are head over heels for you. I can guarantee, 100% guarantee, that if you give that enough time, that angelic projection will turn into a demonic projection. You cannot see someone in an overblown position of complete positivity forever, because it's unrealistic. You have built yourself a foundation on stilts, which have rested on sand, and that sand is going to tip, the stilts are going to fall, and they might fall this way and go even deeper into it, and they'll call you some kind of, maybe a spiritual story comes through, your twin flames or your soulmates, and it's all meant to be, and you tilt even deeper into the positive projection. More likely, you collapse backwards and you suddenly become the narcissist, the manipulator. You become all of these red flags. If they put you on the pedestal, it is only a matter of time before they're going to put you down in the pit, because this is the kind of person who also does that for themselves, and we all do it to some degree. If this is plus 100 and this is minus 100, complete angels and absolute demons, most of us swing in and out on a daily basis in how we treat ourselves. But if someone's really got you in that overly romantic projection psychology space, just watch out for it. They're not actually dating you. They're dating their idea of you, and they're trying to, maybe from a Jungian psychology perspective, it's an anima or an animus projection, the ideal man or the ideal woman. It's bound to crumble. It just won't last. And all of these red flags put together, 22 of these red flags, the number one shadow psychology invitation, as I've tried to emphasize, is please own your fair share of all of these possible issues and trauma-based dysfunctions. No one's perfect. We're never fully healed, and I appreciate you sharing your stories in the comment section down below, but if you're going to go off on this rant about how they were the worst thing ever, you have just put yourself into the demonization position, which means that if you look at the psychology of the two of you, they're the demon, you're the angel. It will flip around, and it's an unstable game that you don't need to keep playing. You can be informed, and please be aware about the various ways that dysfunction can come up, but also be willing to own your fair share of your own dysfunctions, and then we can actually get towards conscious relationships. These are just 22 red flags. There are many more we could go into. It's kind of a clickbaity video for me to make. I don't make videos like this too often. I'm far more interested in deep dive trauma psychology. But if you do want to go deeper onto shadow psychology in particular, you can check out one of my recent videos on romantic projection, which is a lot more grounded and a bit less sensational. But I'll see you over there, and I hope you enjoyed this video.